Alright, let's take this topic, which is called solving linear inequalities involving absolute value. This is just the basic version of it, and it's going to reflect quite a bit what we've done before with solving linear equations with absolute value, where we need to isolate the absolute value by itself, set up two equations, in this case it will be two inequalities, and solve them. Just remember again as a quick reminder, the reason why they're called inequalities is because they have these signs, and the main rule that we have to remember when we're solving inequalities is if we multiply or divide on both sides by a negative number, we have to flip that inequality. That's from a different video. I'm not going to go through that right now. But just remember that whenever you multiply or divide by a negative number on both sides, you have to flip the inequality. And we'll hopefully have an example of that so you can see what I'm talking about. Alright, let's just start off with a couple of basic ones. So our first linear inequality will be w minus 3. We're going to take the absolute value of that as less than 8. Our first step is done for us already. We already have the absolute value isolated. There's nothing else hanging around outside the absolute value sign on that side of the equation. So our next step is to break this out into two different inequalities and then solve those. The first inequality we're going to write down, we just drop the absolute value sign, and we'll solve that in just a minute. The second inequality that we're going to write down is we're going to drop the absolute value sign, and then we're going to flip the inequality and change the sign. So that's always what you do when we have an inequality like that. You rewrite it once exactly as is, just dropping the absolute value signs. Then you rewrite it almost the same. You drop the absolute values on your second inequality, but you flip the inequality sign and change the sign of what's on the right hand side. Now we just solve them, and again, this is basically a one-step inequality to solve. So we're going to add 3 to both sides, and when we rewrite, we end up that w is going to be less than 19. Sorry, that's my brain working way too fast. And let me get rid of that. Try again. Let's add 3. Not 11. And then we'll get w is less than 11. That's going to be one of our answers. And on the other inequality, again, we're going to add 3. And then when we rewrite, negative 8 plus 3 is negative 5. And that's going to be our other answer. So w can be less than 11, and w can be greater than negative 5. So anywhere in that ballpark is absolutely okay. And let's try another sample of this. Alright, our next example will be, let's see, how about y plus 5 is greater than or equal to 3. Again, the absolute value is solved. It's all by itself on one side, so we don't have anything to do as our first step. Second step is we break it out into the two inequalities. The first one we're going to write is we're just dropping the absolute value sign and rewriting it exactly as it is. We're going to come back and solve that in just a minute. The other one, we drop the absolute value signs, and then we flip the inequality so that it's less than or equal to, and we want to change it to negative 3. So our last task is really just to solve these two inequalities, and that will be that. So when we subtract 5 from both sides on this one, we're going to get y is greater than or equal to negative 2. And when we go over to this one, again, we subtract 5. And we'll get y is less than or equal to negative 8. And again, greater than or equal to negative 2, less than or equal to negative 8, and those are the two solutions. Alright, so let's kick it up a notch. It's going to be the same basic steps. It's just going to have a few more steps to do as we go through it. So we're going to go 2 times the absolute value of w minus 3 minus 8 is greater than or equal to 6. So you can see this one is a little bit more complex. We don't have just a simple absolute value sign on one side. We have a bunch of numbers and all kinds of stuff with the absolute value. So our first task is to isolate that absolute value sign. We want to get the absolute value of w minus 3 all by itself, and everything else needs to go to the other side of the inequality. So we're going to get rid of the 8 first. We're going to add the 8 to both sides. And of course it's going to cancel out here. When we rewrite, 2 times the absolute value of w minus 3 equals, and, oh, not equals, sorry, caught that, greater than or equal to. 6 plus 8 is 14. Now we have a 2 that we need to get rid of, and that's multiplying with the absolute value. So to undo multiplication, we divide. Those will cancel out. What we do to one side, we have to do to the other. Now notice we're dividing by a positive number, so we don't have to flip the greater than or equal to less than or equal. If the 2 had been negative, we would have had to flip it. But it's a positive number, so we're all set with that. So now when we rewrite, we now have w minus 3 in absolute value signs. It's greater than or equal to. 14 divided by 2 gives us 7. Bingo. This looks a lot like what we were just doing. Now is the time where we break it out into 2 separate inequalities. The first one, we just drop the absolute value sign and write it out. The second one, we drop the absolute value sign and we flip the inequality and change that 7 to a negative 7. Cool. So all we have to do now is just add 3. Add 3. And this solution is w is greater than or equal to 10. And then over on this side, we add 3, and we add 3. W is less than or equal to negative 4. So those are our 2 sets of solutions. And again, it's just a few extra steps, but we're following the same type of problem over and over again. So let's try another one. Alright, so how about for this one, we'll do 3 times the absolute value of x plus 4, close the absolute value, minus 7 is less than 14. Okay. Again, we need to isolate the absolute value first. To do that, let's get rid of the 7. We need to minus, or the 7 is being subtracted, so we're going to add it to both sides of the inequality. Again, good housekeeping. We want to rewrite, keep it nice and neat and as organized so we can follow our own steps. Okay, 14 plus 7, that will be 21. Alright, we've almost got the x plus 14 isolated, but that 3 is in the way. 3 is multiplying with it, so how do we undo multiplication? We divide. It will cancel out. What we do to one side, we must do to the other side. So again, we want to rewrite. Absolute value of x plus 14 is going to be less than 21 divided by 3, gives us 7. Great. Now we're at the same spot of the types of inequalities we started this video with. We write it out one way where we just drop the inequality sign and copy it. I'm sorry, we drop the absolute value sign and copy it. And then the other inequality, we write out the left-hand side and flip it to greater than, make the 7 negative. Again, these are both very easy inequalities to solve. They're one-steppers. We're just going to subtract a 14 from both sides. So our first set of solutions is x is less than negative 7. And then the other one, let's subtract the 14, subtract the 14. X will be greater than negative 21. And there you go. Those are your 2 sets of solutions. I think what we'll do is we'll do one more problem, but I want you to just copy it down. Hit the pause button, work it out, and then hit play and see if you and I get the same exact answers. I think that would be a good way to handle it. And then you'll feel hopefully confident enough to be able to do this on your own. Okay, so let's see. Let's try 2 absolute value w plus 5, close the absolute value, plus 8 is less than 18. Alright, so give that a whirl. Why don't you hit the pause button, work it out, come on back, and then see if we have the same answers. So the first thing you want to do is subtract the 8 to get rid of it. The 8s are going to be gone when we rewrite. 2 absolute value of w plus 5 is less than 18 take away 8 is going to give us 10. Now we're going to divide both sides by 2 to cancel it out from this side. What we do to one side, we do to the other. So now we have w plus 5 in absolute value, less than 5. We rewrite the first one as is, rewrite the second one, flip that inequality, change the 5 to a negative, and then we just solve them out. 5 take away 5 is 0. And that's okay, because 0 is still a number. So any number less than 0. Okay. And then we do the same thing with this inequality, and we end up with w is greater than negative 10. So you should have w is less than 0 and w is greater than negative 10. Hope that worked out good for you. If you have any questions, or there's a part of this that you don't understand, come find me and I will help clarify it. Thanks.